And it sounds like we're now going to Capitol Hill, where Representative Mike Turner from Ohio is going to be with us to talk a little bit about what's going on. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Just wanted to start off, can you talk to us a little bit about the fight over defense and taxes on the Hill? Just give us the broad lay of the landscape as you see it.
Right. Just, obviously everyone is very concerned about the effects of what is now known as sequestration. As you recall, when the president asked Congress to raise the debt limit, he proposed that there be a super committee that if they failed to make recommendations to offset over a 10-year period the increases in the debt limit, that there would be automatic cuts that fall both on domestic spending and defense spending. This would be on defense spending an additional $500 billion worth of cuts that would fall indiscriminately across the board, 10%. That would be devastating to our national security and to defense. It's one of the reasons why I voted against this mess, because I was afraid that, of course, the super committee would fail and we'd be facing these cuts. One of the problems is that Congress last week just passed, without my vote, a continuing resolution for the next 6 months, going past the January deadline for sequestration, which I believe makes the sequestration cuts more likely to fall into effect.
Congressman John Allen here. Let me ask you about something you might be able to vote for, which is something to avert these defense cuts. We'd heard a little bit that before the CR passed, there might be some sort of provision that would give flexibility to the Pentagon to figure out what to cut and what not to cut instead of across the board. There was also talk of delaying it. How close did that come to happening in the CR, and do you expect Congress to move on something like that in the supplemental perhaps early next year?
Well, you're right. In fact, I did vote yes on the House's proposal to set aside sequestration, to offset it with other cuts in the overall budget. That went to the Senate, where it was summarily tabled, as Harry Reid is so proud to do these days with matters that come from the House. And it has been unanswered by either the Senate or the President. We're sitting with the House having a proposal on the table, the Senate having no proposal whatsoever, not even a debate on proposals, and no recommendation or proposal coming from the President. So as we sit, we're all in a waiting mode for the President to show leadership, to come forward with a recommendation to offset the sequestration cuts, which we now know from Woodward's book that they were his recommendation, his idea, and we sit with no recommendation from him.
But do you think that it would be a good idea to, if cuts are going to happen, give the Defense Department more authority to decide where those cuts are going to happen, or is that a bad idea? Does the administration already have too much power over the purse?
Well, obviously, the first choice would be that the sequestration cuts not happen at all. Secretary Panetta and former Secretary Gates said that these cuts would be devastating. As you'll recall, the defense budget already sustained a $500 billion cut over a 10-year period. This is an additional $500 billion cut over that same period. So the preference would be, obviously, that they not occur at all. However, you are absolutely right. If they are to go into place, I do believe the Department of Defense does need the discretion to be able to set aside the cuts in certain areas, because even though it's a 10% across the board, for some programs a 10% cut will in fact kill the program. You can't, for example, buy 90% of a plane. So there are ways in which the Department of Defense probably needs to have flexibility to be able to move those cuts around to affect them. But I think everyone agrees, even the President, although he has no proposal, agrees that these cuts would be devastating.
Congressman, let me ask you this. When it comes to defense and taxes, is it more important to preserve Pentagon spending or to preserve tax rates as they are for all Americans?
I think the issue of taxes is one that's very interesting because, I'm from Southwest Ohio, 3rd District, Dayton, Ohio, now looking toward the 10th in Ohio. And every group that I go to, I always ask them the question about raising taxes, because the President has been saying that we must raise taxes. Republicans are against raising taxes. So I ask the room, would you be willing to pay increased taxes to actually pay down the national debt? And people, usually overwhelmingly are willing to make that deal. But then when you ask them the next question, which is the President's deal, would you be willing to pay increased taxes for increased spending, that you actually believe Washington, D.C. is not spending enough and you'd like to pay increased taxes for that? And I've never been in any room, in bipartisan rooms I asked that question to, where anyone has ever raised their hand. And I explained to them that's, of course, why the President's budget, when it went both to the House floor and the Senate floor, garnered no votes, because no one is for increased taxes, for increased spending, except for this President.
Congressman, let me follow up on that. Jobs and spending and the federal deficit. You're arguing just a little while ago to avert the sequestration cuts. One of the big arguments for that is that it will cut jobs. Those are government jobs, or in some cases private sector jobs supported by the government. What's the difference between those jobs and jobs on the domestic side that are supported by government spending in your mind?
Well, I mean, there's a couple issues here. I mean, one, federal spending on the Department of Defense, national security area, is just slightly over 17% of the budget. So 50% of these overall cuts would fall on what's just 17% of the budget. Even if it wasn't what I believe it is the most important portion of our overall budget, intuitively you'd know that nothing, that 17% of the budget should take 50% of the overall cost in cutting spending. Now, however, national security is probably our most important thing that we could spend on. It's from which we can ensure that we have our freedom. We know that the world is not getting to be a safer place, and we know that from Secretary Panetta and Secretary Gates, there you have two men who certainly know both the Department of Defense, who are well regarded on a bipartisan basis, who say these cuts are irresponsible. So if you look at a percentage of the overall budget, if you look at the importance of national security, and you look at these two experts that we have, I think we can pretty much conclude these are the wrong cuts at the wrong place.
Congressman Turner, I want to thank you for joining us there live from Capitol Hill on POLITICOlive on Congress. We hope to see you again soon, and, well, at least after the November election, probably, but soon enough, hopefully.
Excellent. Thank you so much.